Hi, my name's Anthony Valiulis. I'm the founder of Davinci Industries, and we make a product called Acutrack. Our product has helped revolutionize the retail industry by tracking inventory in retail stores in real time without the need of RFID, cameras, or weight scales.
I'm Ryan Zimmerman. I'm the CTO for Davinci Industries, and I handle all of our software and a lot of our sourcing and other design requirements and manufacturing requirements.
Excellent, excellent. And I can tell that you gentlemen have participated in presentations and or pitch competitions because you sound much more at ease here than I do. I'll just tell you that straight away. Okay, so Anthony, I have seen you do 1.5 presentations now on Acutrack, but I know that most people just from a verbal description are not necessarily going to get it. I don't know if you have a unit floating around that you can show folks, or I can get an image, I'm sure, later on and just kind of paste it into the video. But go ahead and describe when you're talking about the products. What are we talking about?
So the product that we have here is Acutrack. So this is the first version that we have. We plan to build this out for anything you see in a retail store and retail store fixtures. So as you can see, it has this belt on here, and as this belt moves forward, this is actually knowing the position of the products and also pulling them forward. So this lets you know exactly how much inventory you have on the shelf and lets you know when you need to restock that inventory. Now, our ultimate goal is that we could build products similar to this for anything you see in a retail store and track everything in a retail store on reusable tracking technology.
Okay, and I know this is one of the first questions I think that you get in most scenarios. I know it's one of the first ones came to my mind. That looks like it would work flawlessly for like 80% of the things that I see in a convenience store or a Walmart or whatever. How are we handling things like a big jug of laundry detergent or whatever, right? A softball.
It's hilarious that you mention a big jug of laundry detergent. We actually have a design in the pipeline right now that would work with that, and it's waterproof, freeze proof, can be used in the freezer section, doesn't need to be, the shelf unit doesn't need to be plugged in. So there's a lot more coming with regards to that.
Excellent. Okay, so that's the physical product of, okay, here's where you hang the stuff. How does that deliver on the promises that you were mentioning earlier about actually tracking the items in question?
Yeah, so the way that it communicates essentially as it's moving, it's hitting a circuit board that's in the unit and letting you know the position. So we actually have a software we built out that'll let you know exactly what inventory is left on that unit and can even send notifications when those hooks become empty or, if possible, theft happening in the area. So really what we're trying to do is transform the way that people think about tracking inventory. Instead of being something that you have to do physically, it can all be done digitally.
Okay, all right. So now I'm already getting a sense for, because I go to like I'll go to a Menards and I want to ask them at the front counter, hey, do you have any trilateral frame gears? And they'll check on the computer and they'll say, oh yeah, we have 3. It's in aisle 1 billion. So I go back to aisle 1 billion and there's an empty spot there. There aren't 3 of them, there are 0 of them. Mm-hmm. But the computer said there were 3. So this is already, I see the value here, right? In that you've got more accuracy, I'm sure, than most stores. But also you have kind of a graphical interface that you're showing as well, right? Ryan, is that what you've got going on back there?
Well, it's not really going on due to the polarization of my camera. So I would love if we could swap in an actual demo for this part, but yeah. Long story short, you can browse everything in the store. You can see quick at-a-glance tooltips. open things up and you'll see detailed views of everything that's going on and exactly when and how much it's moved, which is useful for analytics and tracking. And
yeah, and because I've seen you demo this, those bar graphs that we're showing there, that's a live feed essentially from the product that Anthony was showing a second ago. So we've got wireless and more accurate tracking of products, which I am at, before we go on and talk about kind of the company and the founding and the idea behind the products and such, I can already picture that this represents value to anybody who has a store with dozens and dozens of products. Give me a sample of some of the ways, some of the numbers that stores could hope to see as a benefit from using this product.
Yeah, for sure. So like looking at retail industry right now, inventory accuracy is only around 63% accurate. So really, if you go to a store, there's a very good chance that you're not going to be able to find that product. And that's actually representing a number of 32% of people experience out of stock inventory when they go to a store. So the big issue that we're really tackling is the fact that $1 trillion is being lost due to out of stock inventory. And what we believe is that we can provide a saving cost, even if we can provide a fraction of that, bringing it back by having those stores being stocked, it can save them millions of dollars.
Right. So that's just from the standpoint of my trip to Menards, where they said there were 3 of them on the shelf and they're actually 0. You're already talking about better accuracy there from employee stocking time, trips back and forth to the shelf, all of those sorts of things. We're talking about savings there. And then you also mentioned the possibility of theft detection / prevention, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a really big issue right now in the industry. It actually grew last year by up to 15% of theft increase within stores. And that is a $500 million issue right now that's occurring within the retail space. And that leads to the problem of the out-of-stock inventory, right? Because normally what a store will do to track it is they'll have their sales to the front. So say, okay, this product's been sold, therefore it's no longer in inventory. But when something's stolen, there's no way for the store to really know that necessarily. So that's not tracked out of their inventory. So it's hitting them twice. It's hitting them first when the product's stolen, and then when you experience it not being on the shelf. And then, of course, again, too, it brings down customer satisfaction because you go to a store to purchase that product. And if it's not there, it doesn't matter how good the customer service is if you can't buy what you're looking for.
Right. Yeah. I love that you smiled at me and you said, sir, and whatever, but you didn't have any. And I just wasted X number of minutes of my life. Yeah. Hate it. Okay. So we'll talk about kind of the formation of the company and the idea behind the product here in a second. But before we do that, so I'm looking at this thing from my perspective, that product you held up looks an awful lot like any given rack mounts type thing that I see in a store, but clearly there's more going on behind that. Ryan, and I appreciate that there are patents and these sorts of things involved, so you can't just tell me everything, but what are the critical bits that you would want to share about the tech that's going on behind the scenes?
Well, I think first off, one of the most important things is exactly what you just said. It's just a hook. You can hang it on the wall, you can take it off, you can toss it in a bin. 6 months later, you can pull it out, stick it somewhere else. We've got an entire video showing the installation. It's pretty easy because the installation portion takes 1 or 2 seconds. And so making this reliable and dependable without feeling like some piece of technology that needs to be installed and checked and plugged in and messed with is really, really important to us. And yeah, I'm not going to say anything actually about the sensor because that is international patent pending on the sensor. For our transmission technologies and stuff, that's a lot more standard and off the shelf. It's quite proven and reliable. And that's where we're able to hit those multi-year battery life that matters so much to us. Okay.
And the point I think that I would probably drive home there kind of from the consumer standpoint, the consumer being I own a shop, is that what you just hit on, this isn't something that has to be plugged in. It doesn't need a wire, none of that. This is something you put on, take off the pegboard, what have you, throw it in the bin, pull it out again. and it's still wirelessly connected to the display that we see behind your shoulder there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then the actual setup, so you can switch products very quickly. That setup's going to be very, very straightforward. It's going to work by you scan the UPC on the product, and then you scan the side of the Acutrack, which has a QR code on it, and then it's done. The entire database is already updated for you.
Nice. Okay, so Anthony, as promised, tell me about the genesis of the idea. How did you come up with this?
Well, that's actually a really long story because it's kind of a combination of me and my dad. And this idea is, in a way, 10 years old, right? So my dad originally came up with a design similar to this product, a lot different because sadly it didn't work. But part of the thing he came up with is how can we better automate retail stores around 10 years ago? And I found this really old looking version that essentially was the first generation of Acutrack in my basement. Came back from college. I have an entrepreneurial pitch competition. I'm like, hey, this is a really cool idea. Well, can I innovate this? Can we bring something to it and maybe try to bring it to market? He's like, yeah, I don't see why not. I'm not doing anything with it anymore. So I came and I went to pitch at my school at St. Olaf at the Oli Cup there and actually won that competition for $10,000, which is great. And finally realized that there was something here for this product. Went on to pitch at many different other pitch competitions and actually met Ryan at St. Olaf 2 years later when he pitched at the Oli Cup, saw the software application that he was building for another product and wanted him to be part of our team. And since then, we pitched at probably close to 15 different pitch competitions and have placed at like 11 out of those 15. Nice.
Okay, so give me a sense of a timeline. We know that 10 years or so ago was when Dad worked on the 0.1 version of Acutrack. And then how long ago did you first dust that off and do the first pitch? And then when did you bring Ryan on board and said, hey, we got to do this thing?
Yeah, so I started working on this probably close to 2.5 years ago when I found it in the basement. About half a year later, I pitched at the pitch competitions and won that. And about a year and a half later, I met Ryan. So between that time, I went on to a lot of different pitch competitions, really learned a lot more about what it means to work in business and how to really develop a product. But the biggest hurdle that we still had was we didn't know how to build a software. Like, we knew plenty about the electronics, we knew plenty about that area, but we weren't sure on how to build the software, especially for an affordable cost. Like, we were getting pricing from anywhere from $15,000 to build it to $100,000. And so I was like, I don't really know what I'm looking at for actual pricing. And then I kind of realized I wanted someone more on our team rather than a service to be building that software. So that's why I saw what Ryan was doing and how quickly he could build a software. Like, he built a software in less than a week. And I was like, this is someone I'd love to have on my team.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think that the prevailing wisdom on this is, listen, this is, the software side is such a critical element to the product as you've described it. This is not something that you would want outsourced for any number of reasons, right? You want to keep the IP close to home. You want to have somebody who's got skin in the game, who's invested, and has also demonstrated expertise here. And clearly, Ryan, that's you. So give me your perspective, Ryan. How were you first introduced to the idea, first introduced to Anthony? Did he come up to you out of the blue and say, hey, do this thing for me? How did that happen?
No, I'd been aware of Anthony's project sort of on the fringes of it for a while, because I was following the pitch competitions, and I love everything to do with startups in the startup world. It's my favorite place to be. And I was concerned with him developing this software. If you pay, say, $20,000 to have a partner develop a software like that, 9 times out of 10, what's going to happen is you're going to get a product that is either available on the market or that they've already built in-house, and they're going to try and twist that to meet your needs as inexpensively as possible. And so with something like Acutrack, that means you're going to be building off of the same old paradigms of every other tracking and analytics software. And you're going to get, if you're lucky, you're going to get some shiny dashboard that's basically just a database dump report filtered into pretty pie graphs for you. And we want to take this to a much lower level with stuff like this instant feedback. All of our analytics change instantly. And So bringing it in-house, I think, was a really cool way of giving us ownership of that. And as we expand, it means that the software itself is also a possible route for expansion, not just further hardware designs that come from us in-house.
Gotcha. Yeah, as opposed to hiring this out and getting a shiny new interface on somebody else's multi-year-old problems that may or may not be a great fit for what you're actually doing, just address all the needs, right?
Yep.
These are the things that we need to do. This is how we want it to look. And you have a better chance to shape that into what you want. Sure. Totally makes sense.
And I remember too that Ryan came into my room because I had these giant blueprints of the Acutrack, like how it's built and everything in CAD files. And Ryan saw, he's like, "Ooh, let me build that software for that." And I'm like, "What?" I have no idea what you're talking about yet. And then I was like, "Okay, well maybe." And then I actually saw what he could build too from that pitch competition. I was like, "Okay, yeah, no, he's not kidding, actually."
Yeah, no, and then we had a really early version in his room, and I think 2 days later I had it working to a really basic level, like where you could move the thing and you'd see the number update.
Yeah.
So, wait,
Yeah.
say that again, because I'm not sure I grasp that. How long did it take you to go from, oh, cool, look, blueprints, I want to make that, to I have a rudimentary version that actually displays number changes?
I think that was around 2 days.
All right. Hey, Anthony, good catch. All right. So let me ask this then. So we clearly have a product. You've shown it to me. I've held it. We have early versions. Where is this in terms of going to market?
That's an interesting topic because technically it's on the market and also it's not, because there's two versions. There's the front-facing version, which we currently have in the market, and it's generated close to $30,000 in sales so far. But then we also have the electronic version, which doesn't launch till next year. So it's interesting because one of the things I mentioned too early on was the fact that this is actually pulling products forward. And so in the retail industry, that's known as front-facing. And it can be a cost as high as $100,000 per year. And that's actually what we learned from a case study with a major retailer. So that's been on the market. The electronic version, we're hoping to launch next year after we can complete a case study with retailers to really show the value of how this product can change the market and change the way that people think about inventory management and inventory control in general.
Okay, so you want to get the best possible version, has all the electronics, it has the interface that we've seen demoed there behind Ryan's shoulder, has all of that, and you want to get that in a store, generate real data, real world use, and then use that data to move forward and determine, hey, how are we actually going to market this? Is that essentially it?
Yeah, exactly. Because from a retailer's perspective, I can show them all these cool things it can do, but the bottom line is they want to see how it's going to save them money. So I need to be able to show them that. And that's what we had to do before we could start selling the front-facing version. I say, hey, how long is this going to take to pay for itself? And I actually needed a finite number for that before I could really be selling it to them.
Okay, so give me a sense of what are your thoughts as to, I realize we're looking into the future now, this is crystal ball territory, but when roughly do you anticipate doing the case study to get the numbers here for real world use of the front-facing unit?
Yeah, the goal would be early next year, actually. We already have a retailer interested in doing that case study, actually several retailers interested in it. So we're hoping to launch it early next year. That could, depending on how long that's going to take before we're going to start selling it, really depends on the data we're gathering too. So the goal would be to do it kind of like a standard rollout for a case study around 150 units. And once we have that value, we can start selling it to other retailers, but we'll probably continue that case study for a while, even after we start selling it.
Sure. Folks love longitudinal data, right? A 3-month study, great. A 2-year study, even more useful. Sure. Okay, so let me move ahead. Now we're really kind of fast tracking into the future. But since you have generated a non-zero amount of money already, this isn't maybe such a far-fetched prediction. But when we're looking at the business model for the company, we're looking at producing these units, we're looking at selling them, we're looking at installation, maintenance, whatever. The whole business model around the Acutrack, Give me an idea of a major challenge that you either anticipate dealing with or are dealing with now, and
Mhm.
how are you going to address that?
Yeah, sure. And I'll cover from a business side, and then Ryan, you can kind of cover from a technical side.
Great.
So from the business side, it's really how are we going to be showing this value to retailers too? But also in terms of the retail space, how do we keep innovating the product? Because in our space, it's common for people to knock off patents, take ideas, and re-engineer them. So I think it's a combination of those two. And really, the best way to do it is to get out there and start selling the product, of course, and really have a fast rollout too. So even if we get one major retail company to adopt it, such as a C store, which is a convenience store, or a large big box store, then by that itself is kind of a domino effect where other retailers are going to be wanting to use the product. So really our goal is to get one major retailer to say, yes, we really like what you're doing. We're going to start doing a regional rollout, and then we're going to do a national or international rollout, and have those other retailers kind of follow suit. But at the same time, we need to make sure our capacity can handle that. So one thing we're doing is we have a licensing agreement with a company called Brugman Retail Group for the front-facing side of Acutrack. So they're really helping take on those costs of building molds, testing out units, and finding the right retailers for early on test of the front-facing version of the product. Our goal now is to get the electronic version ready and be able to do that at scale. And Ryan can kind of cover that part from a technical standpoint.
Yeah, tell me about it, Ryan.
On the technical side of everything, there's been a long history within the company of iterative improvement, which is going very, very well. One of the main recurring themes in that on both the electronics and software side is how much of this we need to do in-house and where we should employ existing products on the market, whether that's like open source software that we might want to use inside our software, or for example, right now we're working on the transmitters we use, and that's a component where we could go buy it off the shelf, and we could go buy several different versions of that off the shelf, from very reliable, very expensive, all the way down to less expensive. Or it could be something we do in-house entirely. And that's actually something we're in the middle of. And those are sort of pretty complicated decisions, cost-wise, engineering-wise, what that means for bringing in new employees down the road, all those things. It's a balancing act. Okay.
So it sounds to me like there's some cost benefit analysis you need to do. Do we get the Cadillac of transmitters, which is going to up our unit price, and whatever other factors come into play, maintenance and these sorts of things, lifetime of the unit, or do we get the cheapest possible thing? Okay. So give me an idea of some of the measuring sticks that you're going to use there, or the expertise that you're bringing in. How do you go about making that kind of a call?
There's no one right answer. There's multiple correct answers at different scales, especially scales. So we have a really good idea where we'd like to be with that technology and how we'd like to develop that 2 years from now.
Okay.
and we're already working on lining up those contacts and those people who we will work with at that point. But that answer, the answer for producing 10,000 units is a different answer for producing 150 units. And it was a different answer from how we produced the first 5 that we currently have working. And those work really well. We've deployed them in a store, and we've actually, hung them up in the store, and it works. And that was a great feeling.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. Okay, so Anthony, let me ask you this question. When you talk about, and this is my wheelhouse, when you talk about people operations, talking about people issues in companies, in any industry, you're dealing with humans, so there are going to be challenges. Give me a feel for what's a people issue that you've encountered to date or anticipate dealing with, and how are you going to solve that?
Having a culture around Davinci where we have people that all get along, that no one's afraid to ask another person a question, even if they're a higher position, because there's no fear of repercussion for that. And really trying to build synergy between everyone that's working there, and not having those issues that I see at so many companies where one person has to report to another person, to another person, to another person before they can finally get an answer. It's really, look, if you notice an issue even if you're one of the lower positions, just talk to the other person right away and don't go through all that bureaucratic nonsense. And really, the biggest thing I think is that we want to create a company where everyone gets along and everyone has a shared vision, because if you don't have that shared vision, it's really hard to have a good functioning company.
Absolutely. Yeah. So two of the things that I hear you touch on there, one of which is having the proper gatekeeping for who we let into the company, because you're setting the culture of the company for years in advance with every hire, with everybody that you bring on board. So that it's critical to do that well, to understand your values and the vision of the company and to interview well. And then also the point that you made about being able to ask questions, being able to raise comments, regardless of who you're talking to. If it's the CEO, if it's one of your peers, that's a concept I've touched on recently called psychological safety. Do you feel safe in any given aspect of the company environment to raise your hand and say, hey, I've got a question, or I don't know that that's going to go so well. I have input on that. And that's part of building the culture as well. Do people feel like they can raise that hand, ask a question, offer a different viewpoint? So I'm certainly glad to hear you touch on that. So I've talked about a lot of things, asked a lot of questions, and I think we've covered a lot of the basics. But in the interest of your time, gentlemen, what is one other thing, if anything we haven't touched on, that you would want people to know about Davinci Industries and or Acutrack?
Because one of the things we're in the middle of with as we start with all this technology is the technologies we tie ourselves to have huge impact on who we can hire in the future and how difficult or simple that would be. So while we make a lot of technical decisions based on cost and development speed and all those things, we absolutely consider how quickly we could find other people who could join our team, or how would we get them up to speed, and how can we find existing standards and frameworks that might streamline that process.
Okay, right. So if you're making a call, hey, we're going to use Ruby, we're going to use Angular, whatever, that is going to understandably impact the demographics you can choose job candidates from, right? If it's some bizarre tech that no one's ever heard of, there are 3 people you could possibly hire anywhere on the planet. That makes it a little harder to fill the ranks.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool, appreciate that. Anthony, what are your thoughts?
And I'm kind of building off that a little bit too, is that we really want to make a simplified product that can be helpful for people in the retail space and to the customers. So we're not just building a product really to track inventory within retail stores. We're trying to make a product that's making life easier for customers, employees, and for the retailer. Because really what we want to do is we want to simplify how you have a retail experience and make life easier and more comfortable for people in the retail space.
Very good. Very good. I appreciate that. All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. And I certainly look forward to waltzing into any number of the stores around me and using an Acutrack and thinking fondly back to this conversation. So thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you too.
Thank you.